Hello everybody and welcome to VCCS demonstration. VCCS is a short form of Virtual Continuous Cluster Server and it provides a HADL solution in VMware. Let's look at the contents. Before we start with the demo, let's look at the environment first. Then, let's see how cluster is created through the HA wizard. Next, we'll see how VCCS failover when failure occurs. After failover, I will fail back the service back to the original active server. Lastly, I will show you how easy it is to manage VCCS. Now let's look at the demo configuration. From the view, you can see that DB server is running single in VMware environment. There are two ESXi hosts and various VMs are located on top of them. DB server is running the service with IP address of 10.20.99.61. And vCenter server also exists to manage hosts and VMs. As you can see in the vCenter console, VCCS is installed in vCenter server. There are two direct connection network paths between hosts. One is cluster communication path for heartbeat, another is mirroring path for data replication. Standby virtual machine will be created automatically when you start configuration of cluster driven by wizard. Existing service IP address for client connection will be replaced to virtual IP address, which will be managed and switchable between VMs by VCCS. Alternative real IP address will be assigned on both active and standby VMs, since it uses the same subnet with the service IP address. Optionally, DB data of active VM is real-time replicated to standby VM as user definition. Now let's build HA and DR for a single virtual machine. You are now looking at vCenter server through vSphere client. I pre-installed the VCCS in vCenter server. Installation is very easy and this only takes a few minutes. Once VCCS is installed, its management console is consolidated into vCenter. As you can see here, there is a VCCS tab created on the right side of the vCenter console. There is a VM called DB server in the VM inventory of the left pane. I will build virtual machine redundancy using VCCS. Now let's begin. I will click on the VCCS tab and connect VCCS main menu. And click on the HA cluster button from main menu. Then HA cluster wizard will appear. Select a source VM to create a cluster from source system details windows. Now define some information for configuration with just a few mouse clicks, and standby VM will be created, as well as cluster set. Firstly, define a cluster name and service IP address. Let's name it cluster DB. Next, define a host and a data store for standby VM at target system details window. And then define standby VM name and its host name. Now define service and enter heartbeat and mirror IP addresses. Existing IP address for client connection will be replaced to service IP, which is managed and switchable by VCCS as I described before. Define alternative IP address to manage the source and standby VM. Define heartbeat and mirror IP addresses. Next step is to select application to be managed. Since Oracle DB is running in the source VM at this demo, I will configure Oracle HA. Enter an account information for DB authentication. Check DB information related to Oracle in source VM and click Next. Lastly, verify HA cluster information set up by the wizard and click Finish button. Then, based on source VM, standby VM and cluster between two VMs are created. All the settings are processing automatically. HA cluster creation for single running DB server is completed. DB server exists in host server called DB Active, which is active VM, and standby VM is powered on state called DB Standby in another host. Now I will cause failures in active VM and I will show you how VCCS failover. For failure scenario, first, I will shut down the active VM. Second, I will plug off the network interface card. Third, I will plug off the disk which contains Oracle database. Last, I will shut the application. Before we move to failure scenario, let me briefly introduce cluster state of two VMs. On the right side, Windows is the global management view of VCCS. Now I will double click the DB's cluster which I created just now. Then you will see two clustered virtual machines and state of active VM is in color and standby VM is in gray. Now DB active is online and DB standby is offline. Let's name them DBA and DBS in a short form. I've opened another vSphere client for failure scenario. With these two windows, we can see how VCCS detects these failures and how it failover to the standby, as well as watching how we cause these failures all at the same time. First is virtual machine failure. I'm going to shut down the DBA on purpose. Then the DBA is turned to power off mode. You will see that Oracle service will fail over to DBS. VCCS detects DBA is failed and all the resources are brought online in orders in DBS. Second scenario is network failure. Now DBS is active machine. Let's move to edit VM setting of DBS and try to disconnect virtual network adapter which is assigned as service IP address. VCCS detects network connectivity has failed in DBS. Failure mark appears on the network card and the service IP address. Then service fails over to DBA. Eventually, all the Oracle related resources are online in DBA. Third scenario is disk failure. Now DBA is active machine. Let's move to edit setting of DBA and try to delete virtual disk that is replicating to DBS. Then you will see that VCCS detected disk has failure and failure mark has appeared in mirror disk resource in DBA. Then the service is failing over to DBS. Eventually, you will see that all the Oracle related services are online in DBS. Last scenario is the application failure. When VCCS detects a failure in application, it does not fail over to the standby machine right away, but instead tries auto recovery for 3 times in local machine. If the running state survives for more than 10 minutes, retry count is initialized. If failure occurs again within 10 minutes and it has occurred for the 4th time, then it will fail over to the standby machine. Note this feature and let's access DBS and stop Oracle Listener service for 4 times on purpose. I have installed Windows Console of DBS through remote connection. I'm going to stop Oracle Listener service now. VCCS has tried to restart the resource for the first time. I will stop the service once again. Trying for the 3rd time. And the last try. VCCS has tried to restart the resource for 3 times, but for the 4th time, VCCS decides Oracle service will not be able to run on local machine. Give up local recovery and failover to the standby machine. As you can see in the resource management view, all the Oracle related resources are online in DBA. Next, I will show you how the service failed back to original active machine. For your reference, VCCS does not fail back automatically once the original server is back online normally. That means you need to manually switch the service as you wish. I will show you the failback when original machine is restored after failure. On the right side is the resource management view of DB server. You can monitor all the states of online resources in the VM. Currently, DBA is active machine. The resources related to the Oracle service are shown in color in DBA. Now I will reboot running DBA. VCCS detects that DBA has failure, and it failed over the Oracle related resources to the DBS. Now all the resources is online in DBS. When DBA is rebooted normally, this will be joined as cluster member and VCCS will set this as standby role. As you can see, faulted DBA will change to standby mode. Failback is very simple. It will be done by clicking switchover button from the menu bar. All the running resources will go offline in the DBA, and the service has failed back to DBS. Eventually, Oracle-related resources are online in the DBA, and all the resources in DBS are now in standby mode. Now let's see how easy it is to manage VCCS. HA solution is very complicated to build, yet a bunch of scripting jobs and administration is complicated, and only well-trained ones could do it. However, VCCS is really simple and easy to use. Even someone who has never trained can build HA with wizard-driven configuration and intuitive GUI of VCCS. Now I will show you VCCS user interface and then show you how to delete existing cluster. This is VCCS Management Console. VCCS does not require to install additional GUI package. It is plugged in into vCenter console. You are now looking at vCenter console. You can see VCCS tab here. It looks as if VCCS is one of the extended features of vCenter server, providing much easier management environment. Now I'm going to click VCCS tab. In the global management view, you can see total cluster state. Very simple. You can see the service state as well as the VM state in this view. To stop or failover the service, add or edit a resource, all you need to do is to double-click on the cluster. Let's look at the details of cluster. Then you will move on to resource management view and you can see various menus on the top. You can also see list of managed resources, which VM is online and states of each resource. All these functions are available since it is consolidated in vCenter Server. Since VCCS is consolidated in vCenter Server, there is absolutely no need to install additional management tool. Now let's delete HA cluster. Deleting cluster is also as hard work as building a cluster. It is not easy and it's a risky job to return to its original single VM without downtime. However, VCCS is different. Just a few mouse clicking and it is done without downtime. DBA, which was originally single VM, has now clustered through VCCS. Now I'm going to delete HA of this. Click on Delete HA button in the Service Management view. A window appears asking which VM do you want to assign the service IP on its external service network interface card. Here, I will return the service IP to running server, which is DBA VM in this demo. Then you will see that DB cluster is deleted and all the profiles of the VM has initialized as before HA was configured. That is all for VCCS demonstration. Thank you for watching.